Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Denice Show. It's just an honor and a privilege for me to have Major General Paul E. Vallely on the broadcast today. I want to talk a little bit about the General. This is a man that was the senior military analyst for Fox News. He served in the Vietnam War. He retired in 1993 as the Deputy Commanding General of Pacific Command. He wrote a book with Thomas McInerney called The Endgame, The Blueprint for Victory in the War on Terror. Major General Paul Vallely, I was just struck by the fact that in reading your mission statement, you are heavily involved, sir, in supporting returning soldiers back here to the States. I know that you do all kinds of work to support them in making that transition and dealing with post-traumatic stress syndrome. I want to thank you as an American for all you do in trying to help these returning veterans as they make that transition back to America. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you, Denice.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Major General is also the founder and chairman of Stand Up America, standupamericaus.org. That's a website. The foundation is Stand Up US Foundation. I recommend that everyone go to the Major General's website, standupamericaus.org. Sir, there was a great article that I started to read before I had to run to class this morning called Who is Antifa and What You Need to Know. I appreciate it that you put that up on your website. That's something that I think every American should read.
No, absolutely. Ray DiLorenzo, who's my editor for the Saturday newsletter that comes out every week under Stand Up America US, and we wanted to go in depth and track Antifa back to the period of the Nazis in the 1920s and 30s,
right,
where it all started, the anti-fascist movement. So we wanted to bring some historical perspective, how they've always been a violent, gang-like group of thugs mostly, and that's what we see happening in America today.
They're, in a sense, they are, based on what I know about them historically. Talked a little bit about former CIA analyst Claire Lopez. They're a communist organization, and they're not at opposite ends of the spectrum. They're basically cousins on the left. Fascism and communism, and this group is really a violent and dangerous group to the United States. Would you support the president's decision if he decided to designate Antifa as a domestic terrorist group, sir?
Absolutely, and they need to be, because they're creating terror in these cities. They're beating up people. They're attacking innocent people on the streets, like the young, I don't know whether he was I think he was a correspondent, young Oriental man.
Right, that's right. Well, he was a conservative. He was a conservative, and they beat him up, and he had bleeding on the brain. And has had tremendous medical costs as a result.
Yeah, they're terrorists. They need to be taken in.
They do.
Here's the other thing, Denice, about that. These mayors, like the mayor of Portland, are violating and not upholding the law.
Right.
And the police need to put in handcuffs some of these political leaders who are violating our laws. They are actually doing criminal activities.
You're absolutely...
Just because they're elected to office doesn't mean they're... completely void of being arrested for breaking the law or not enforcing the law.
They definitely appear to be corrupt from my perspective, because any mayor of any city that doesn't work with law enforcement to enforce the tranquility and peacefulness of the cities is absolutely not furthering the justice and safety. And I think Americans have taken for granted the safety of our streets, and it shouldn't be taken for granted, because we have, in communities that were formerly peaceful, we now have these thugs out there walking the streets. They're not on the sidewalks. They're blocking traffic, and they're beating people up for no other reason other than they don't agree with them ideologically. And that absolutely reminds me of the brown shirts in Nazi Germany.
There you go.
Sir, let's talk about. I wanted to bring you on as somebody that's been involved in the military for years and years and involved in military intelligence. I'm really concerned that the Pentagon had considered sending Marines from Europe to the Middle East and decided against it. I understand that originally the Pentagon thought that U.S. forces were needed. More U.S. forces, I should qualify that, more U.S. forces were needed to deter Iran. In the end, they changed their mind and they said, you know what, we need to keep it in Europe to deter Russia and China instead. What an important message that sent to you and I, people that really are deeply concerned about the national security of the United States. What did you think about that decision, sir?
Well, I don't know why they even thought of it, because there's not going to be any kind of a ground war in Iran. It's going to be cyber attacks and airplanes and missiles and drones. So I don't know whoever thought that up.
So you believe the president, you believe the Pentagon, and of course under the leadership of the president was right to keep those troops in Europe?
Well, sure,
okay.
Absolutely. I'm not even sure why they're in Europe anymore. I'd rather bring them back home.
Well, they said to act as a deterrence against Russia and China. They want to make sure that the message is clear to these.
China's not going to attack Europe. Russia's not going to attack Europe. That's all a myth.
Okay, then why do you believe then that the Pentagon has said that they wanted to deter Russia and China, and that this was important, according to multiple defense officials?
It's all Cold War thinking, Denise.
Okay.
The Great Russian Bear. Okay, the Great Russian Bear's never attacked the United States. So the whole thing over there, Russia has lost so many millions of people over the years. They don't want a war. They really don't. But they have to keep up, the arms, just like China does and the United States does, as three military superpowers.
But sir, weren't we fighting a proxy war against the Russians in Syria when we had a larger force of U.S. military personnel in Syria?
No, we weren't fighting the Russians. We were fighting Al Qaeda and ISIS. We weren't fighting the Russians.
Okay, so we.
Well, I mean, the Russians were supporting Assad, who was supporting other groups loyal to Assad in the Syrian government. The United States was supporting, basically going in and eliminating ISIS in eastern Syria. Because of the forces we had, still in Iraq.
Okay.
And so they were very vulnerable to that. So we were protecting basically eastern Syria and our assets and what was going on in Iraq at that time, particularly in Kurdistan.
Well, what I was suggesting by a proxy war is, right, we weren't fighting directly, but indirectly, because, of course, Russia and China were propping up the Assad regime and the Iranians as well. And the Iranians were supporting, along with Hezbollah, the Syrian regime. And we, in effect, were standing against those forces in Syria. So I guess my thought is, in light of the reconstitution, it sounds like ISIS continues to work to reconstitute itself in places like Iraq. I just read a report that ISIS bombed a police headquarters under Palestinian control in the Gaza Strip. By Palestinian control, I mean Hamas, the Islamic Resistance Movement. We know ISIS is there in the Gaza Strip. We know there are still individuals working and forces working inside Iraq and Syria. I guess a lot of people are deeply concerned about this. So in light of that, do you not believe that we should have a certain number of troops serving in those areas like Syria and Iraq? Your thoughts, sir?
Well, we do have troops there. We do have air assets. Yeah.
How many troops do we have there, sir? Do you know approximately?
I don't know the exact number, but they're mostly communications, intelligence, and special operating forces. And we have helicopter crews as well as air crews operating out of Iraq. We do have some special ops up in Kurdistan. So we do have elements that can mount a force or an offensive operation against any ISIS that would pop up in that area, and we're doing that as well.
Okay, I read somewhere it was between 600 and 1,000. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, that sounds about right from what I've read too, Denice. Yes.
Okay, great. So I want to just launch over to the Russian and the fact that the Pentagon still is wanting to deter Russia and China from possibly becoming more.
China's our real enemy, though, economically, and the force and their projection of power throughout the South China Sea, into Africa, the Silk Road. Now that they're building,
right.
Go back to Italy where Marco Polo came from.
Yes.
So you can track all of that. But China is a big threat. There's no doubt about that. I don't consider Russia a big threat to us anymore, or to Europe.
Well, I was concerned because I had read a report just the other day that the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, is really talking about this new hypersonic missile system. I was just reading, sir, that it's 20 times. It can travel 20 times the speed of sound. It can carry a nuclear payload or warhead or a conventional payload, or just if it doesn't even have a warhead sitting on top of this intercontinental ballistic missile system, anywhere where it landed, it would do quite a bit of damage. I know the United States has been working on
that, and also an underwater system of high velocity too. The Russians have been working on.
Right. So
and also space type missions as well.
Right.
And of course, our new space command that President Trump has formed and established is to counter any kind of threats coming from outer space now. So that's something to look forward in the future.
Yes.
China's also doing that. Russia's the space, and as well as America. But also, as these countries gain new technology and we're fighting equipment, jets, bombers, missiles, cyber terrorism or cyber attacks is very, very important today, where you can go in and knock out the computers. And that's what the Israelis would do with Iran if they ever attacked them in the first phase. They would zap all the computers inside Iran.
I understand that the United States has been working with Israel on cybersecurity. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, no, they have been,
Yes.
But it's basically, rather than security, it's actually attacks using laser type equipment, which zaps the computer systems.
Right.
And their weapons and their command and control, their launch systems, aircraft, and so on. And the Israelis have had that capability for several years now. So that would go on in the first phase if there's ever an attack involving Israel and Iran. That's what they would do.
Let's talk about those dirty Democrats for a moment. The Pentagon decided to test its first land-based cruise missile. Everybody on the left is saying that, President Trump has basically initiated a war, a dangerous arms race, in effect, in a Cold War. The president decided to exit the 1987 INF treaty with the former Soviet Union that banned ground-launched nuclear and conventional ballistic and cruise missiles. Tell us a little bit. You've been so involved, as I said, in the United States military and intelligence. Why do you believe, and I'm sure you've talked to the president, why do you believe he exited from that 1987 INF treaty with the former Soviet Union that banned these ballistic and cruise missiles, sir?
Well, one of the reasons is they don't include China and they don't include Iran.
Okay.
And so it's an outdated treaty. And as you can well appreciate, Denice, a lot of these treaties don't mean anything anymore to these countries.
Yes,
they're
I
written
know.
on paper, and if they want to violate them, they violate them, and they could care less.
Well, that's what I thought you were going to say. I figured you were going to say that the Russians had already violated the 1987 INF treaty. So I was
Yeah, so
I was
anyhow,
waiting for you to
as
say
I
that.
say, you can draw these agreements up. That's why President Trump doesn't agree with a lot of them. He'd rather do unilateral country to country, like in trade and also in supporting countries militarily, because even NATO is outdated a great deal, as you may appreciate.
Yes, certainly. So let's talk about the fact that the left, though, is saying that this is creating chaos, instability, and concern among our European allies. You're always talking to people, your contacts there on the European continent. Is that what you hear? Is that the consensus that that resonates with you? That's coming from our allies in Europe, that this is going to precipitate some kind of chaos among America's allies in Europe?
The only chaos I know is within the Democratic Party.
Okay.
Okay, as far as NATO and the Europeans, they have downsized their capability a tremendous amount as far as their military. That's why they haven't contributed to NATO in the amount of dollars that they had promised to do. Their militaries, even the Germans, it's hard to forget 9 ships you can put at sea in the German Navy anymore. And so they've become inert in many ways. Though there's some good forces like the SAS in Britain that we work with, the French Special Ops Forces. Italy, by the way, has a very good Navy.
Oh, okay. Well, I just heard that people were calling for the Italian Navy to go out there and rescue immigrants that were trying to get on boat over to Italy from Africa.
Right.
I don't know if you.
They're very involved in that, but they're a good Navy. But Europe, and that's why, again, President Trump is very correct in aligning himself country to country and working with each country rather than through a very expensive organization like NATO, which is very bureaucratic, just like the European Union. But I think if you look what happened at the meeting last week, the G7, Trump is leading the world. I mean, he is setting the pace for all of these countries. They all look to him and what he's doing. Some of them are not very happy about it because they're getting a lot of kickback, or not kickback, but blowback in their own countries, specifically economically. But as you notice there, Trump controls the press over there. They all are looking at him, and you saw very few leaders other than in a photograph or one type of a conference that he had, like with the Japanese Prime Minister and that new trade agreement. So our president is actively changing the world, in my opinion, and in a good way.
And in an excellent way. And of course, I think they really appreciate the fact that this president has moved the United States economy forward. I just heard a report today, driving from my class, my 4-hour class this morning, driving over here to the studio. I heard a report where, the leftists, the liberal progressives keep talking about a recession, hoping if they talk long enough and hard enough about it, it'll happen. But then I just heard that absolutely, how could it possibly happen with regards to our oil industry, to what's happening around the globe in terms of, U.S. Fossil fuel, the oil industry being beefed up and spreading and making more and more money for Americans here at home. It sounded like that's not at all likely to happen. I don't know if
I think the whole recession thing is a false premise, a false flag. They're planning that in the news. Our economy is very strong. Our workers are out there, the lowest, what did they say, the lowest
employment in 50 years?
Rate
right, the lowest. Since what is it, 1950?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. But Wall Street, some of these firms you can't trust, like Goldman Sachs. You got the globalists that exist on Wall Street that were part of the Bushes and the Clintons and the Obamas and all these global governments and global organizations. What's important what each country does on its own and how it stands in relationship to its other countries, like, say, Britain and the United States. That's why it's important for Britain to exit the European Union with the Brexit plan and do it as soon as possible. But it looks like it'll be October before that's done.
Yeah, it looks like the new Prime Minister Johnson is looking to President Trump a little bit in terms of the fact that the president stands with Boris Johnson in that Brexit plan. But let's change let's change gears, because I know that you have very limited time, and I appreciate the fact that you're so busy and you've taken the time to come on the Denice Gary Show. There's a new book out, and it's by our former Secretary of Defense, Mattis, James Mattis. It's called, the title of his book is Call Sign Chaos. And no, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a dig against the President of the United States. The title, Call Sign Chaos, General Mattis was referred to when he was in active duty as Colonel Have Another Outstanding Solution. That was just, Colonel Have Another Outstanding Solution was just an abbreviated term that was, I guess, he was nicknamed. I'm not quite sure, Major General, but at any rate, I wanted to call your attention. I was doing a quick review of the book, and I noticed that one of the reasons why I believe he was fired, I don't know that a lot of people know this, but Barack Hussein Obama fired General Mattis. And I guess one of the reasons why is because he stood against General Tommy Franks in Afghanistan. He was the U.S. military commander in Afghanistan, and Mattis wanted his troops, the Marines, to go in after Osama bin Laden, who was there hiding out in his Tora Bora hideout. And General Tommy Franks said no. Would you like to comment on that, sir?
Oh, yes. We had bin Laden there in eastern Afghanistan, within 40 kilometers of the Pakistani border. And a book was written by a lieutenant colonel of Special Forces about that, and it was called off.
Why would President George W. Bush and why would General Tommy Franks do that? Can you help us understand that?
I don't think anybody really knows why. To this date, bad decision made in the field of battle. But General Franks, again, I know General Franks. He's an artillery general. He wasn't an infantry general like Patton was, or even when we look back at Pershing and MacArthur, they were great battlefield commanders.
Okay.
They were more interested in trying to build up a force in Afghanistan, which we shouldn't have done. It was a mistake, because we had defeated the Taliban in October, November of 2001 with 100 special ops and CIA military and B-52s. Absolutely wiped them out.
Great.
On that December, we should have been out of that country, put the Afghans with a commander named General Dostrom in charge, and tell General Dostrom, it's your country now. We will be here to support you when you need our help. We'll be on call 24 hours a day. But what did General Franks do in Bush? Build up, trying to introduce nation building into the Muslim world in Afghanistan, and here we are some 18 years later.
Right.
Yeah. Bad leadership, bad decisions, particularly by the Bush administration.
Well, when I think about the fact that they knew he was in Tora Bora, I would have thought they would have bombed the hell out of that mountainside. Yeah. Okay. And one more thing. Another quote from the book talks about Mattis, General Mattis, was against his superiors when those 4 Americans were hanged in Fallujah. They were not only hanged, but they were burned. I don't know. I hope to God they were. I
remember that.
I remember it too, seeing it. And Mattis wanted to bring in the Marines and go after those Sunni insurgents. And he was told to stand down in Fallujah. Bush had decided.
That was Fallujah 1. Yeah, Fallujah 1 and Fallujah 2, by the way.
And so Bush decided to have American commanders work with local leaders to create an all-Iraqi security force. I guess my first thought when I read that was, why in the world would we trust our ability to really understand and know what a foreign force of local leaders would really be up to in Iraq? I mean, I think about, I'm sure you read the history. I think about the British being in Iraq, and after the king was overthrown in Iraq after World War I, the Muslims, massacred those British and literally, like, nipping at their heels, beat them all the way out of their country as they marched out. I mean, there was a horrific slaughter, and yet the British had fought with the Arabs in World War I to give them their independence from the Turks and the Ottoman Empire, and that was their thanks for it. So, it was shocking to me that the President George W. Bush and his leadership would say, well, sit down with these local leaders and create this all-Iraqi security force. Did it not occur to them that this was very idealistic and that some of these Iraqi commanders would turn on us and shoot us in the back, which they did?
Well, Bush and his administration was very naive when it came to the Middle East.
But Colin Powell was...
like going into Iraq. Iraq was never a threat to the United States. But you go back to all these decades of once you go to war, of putting your best general and admiral in charge of an area of operation, give them the mission, and carry it out. Yeah. But what they try to do is control the situation out of Washington in a battlefield environment which they have no clue on. And of course, that goes back to Vietnam when they were approving B-52 strikes from the White House.
Yes. Horrible mistake.
That's the problem when you have these restricted rules of engagement, and you restrict the commanders in the field who you've given the authority to go fight for the American people or for whatever reason they use to enjoin themselves with a treaty or whatever. And so what happens is that you don't have the solid force you need, because the intelligence is on the ground. We have intelligence operations going on continually within the Air Force, the Marines, the Navy, in those area of operations. They know better what's going on than Washington does.
Of course they do.
That's why it's important that you have a good commander and a good general in charge and let them execute the war plans and win and get back home. That's the solution.
But sir, I never served in the military. But common sense told me, when I first learned of George W. Bush's and then Barack's restrictive rules of engagement, how in the world are we ever going to win this thing? And we never really did. I mean, that's just common sense.
Common sense.
So I don't understand how anybody could even think for a moment that restricting the ability to engage the enemy on the battlefield would actually win us a war in the fight against terror. It just doesn't make any sense. And if a Democrat gets elected to president, this country is going to be more vulnerable than ever before.
No doubt about it. No doubt. Well, thank you, Denice.
Thank you, sir.
It's been a pleasure to be on your show today.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. Thank you so much for bringing your insight and understanding to all these issues. We appreciate you and thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, go to standupamericauS.org. That's the Major General's website. There's a tremendous amount of information there that will really help you understand some of the issues we're facing here domestically and internationally. Thank you, Major General Vallely, for your time today.
Thank you, Denice.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got to go to a break. Let's go to our Frugati's commercial, and we'll be right back with a summation.
I want to tell you about a place
I love to go, Frugatti's Italian Restaurant. Very few locations here provide seating outside in front of a fabulous water fountain with an atmosphere that is reminiscent to me of eating outdoors in Venice. This is real Italian food by real Italians. And what makes it even more so is owner Ralph Frugaletti, who nearly a quarter century ago brought a wood fire oven from Milan, Italy to make, like his mother, fresh homemade bread and pizzas. Moreover, Frugatti's Restaurant offers you not only the very best in Southern Italian cooking, even importing the finest ingredients for authentic Italian food, including a fitness menu. After all, Ralph has represented the United States and Italy, competing in the Master Championship Games. He knows all the right food for good fitness, so check out the menu. After today's broadcast, run over to Frugatti's Italian Restaurant and Catering at 600 Coffee Road here in Bakersfield. And after a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday service, stop into Frugatti's for a great lunch. I'll see you there, and tell Mr. Ralph Frugaletti that Denice sent you. Salute. Bon appetito. Ladies and gentlemen, after talking to Major General Paul Vallely of Stand Up America, US.org, I think about Anatase Products and its former Marine Corps officer Scott Baker. Whatever DoD company or contractor that you might work for, I'm looking at a list here. Raytheon, Boeing, General Electric, Northrop Grumman, United Technologies, Lockheed Martin, whatever major defense or aerospace company that you may work for, tell them all about Anatase Products. You know, East Kern County is the hub of the aerospace industry. And people like Scott Baker knows all about how to do what these major defense and aerospace companies need to have done for the Department of Defense and the Pentagon. So you can give him a call at 661-822-6873. Any kind of aircraft bolts for missiles, rockets, satellites, on and on it goes, tanks, whatever weapon system you have, Scott Baker at Anatase Products, they can fill your needs. And let's talk about that wonderful Navy veteran, Craig Jensen. Craig owns Sculpt 365 Fitness here in Bakersfield. He also owns a facility in Oildale on Chester Avenue and one up in Tehachapi. The one that I frequent, well, I don't get there as often as I should, always working, but the one I like to visit most is the one on Callaway at Brimhall. And beautiful facility, state-of-the-art equipment. Give Craig Jansen a call at Sculpt 365 Fitness. Check them out on their website. Go take a visit. Check over the gym. Again, in Oildale on Chester, one in Tehachapi on Sage Lane, and then another one here in Bakersfield on Callaway at Brimhall. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to the Denice Gary Show. Before we go, I want to ask for your prayers. I was just reading a report about sex slaves. You know, so many children were captured by ISIS, the Islamic State, boys and girls. And there's still so many of them that are in captivity. Please pray that these Yazidi children, Christian children, that they are reunited with their families. Please pray for them. Pray for their safety and security. Pray that they are able to either escape or that they're rescued. But pray that they can get back to their families and find the safety and peace that they long for. Say a prayer for the sex slaves being held by ISIS and many. And by the way, we were talking about Iran earlier today. Many of them have been taken to Iran. That's right. Iran is holding many of these children, and they're using them for the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. I believe that's what I've heard. That's what one of their terrorist groups there. And so again, please pray that these children are somehow receive the emotional and mental and spiritual healing they need, and that they are reunited with their families if their family no longer exists, that somehow they get to a beautiful home or orphanage where they can be properly cared for and loved. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Denice Gary Show. This is Denice, signing off.